Hello. So, as I promised yesterday, today we get to work. And what we're going to be doing is alchemy readings. But I feel like there's a little bit more for me to talk about before we get into it. Because I was realizing in my excitement yesterday, I didn't really explain what it is. And, some of you already know. Some of you are very adept at the lingo and understand. But I kind of want to explain in a very basic way just to catch up with anybody who doesn't know, right? Because this process can be valuable for someone who's at any level of awareness around the topic, okay? Because there's always layers, you know? So you could have been doing shadow work for 10 years by now and still get something out of these readings, or you could just be beginning and you'll get what's appropriate for you out of the reading. So, why are we doing alchemy readings? What is an alchemy reading? Okay, so first of all, the reading part, right, is just that we're going to be getting a hold of some energy that's relevant to you. So, when you're drawn intuitively to a reading, your intention should be to be drawn to the readings that are helpful to you and utilize those readings. And when you're drawn to it, you can trust that there is something in the reading that's useful for you. And so the alchemy part is we're going to use this ability that we have to tap into an energy that's relevant to you to actually alchemize anything in that energy that isn't truth. So alchemy, I believe, is defined as something like turning base metals into gold. And so if we apply this to what we're doing, we're actually digging into the psyche to access some things that may not be in your conscious awareness, or may not be in your conscious awareness to the degree that we're going to be looking at them. And we are taking anything that's untrue in the belief system or the energy body or the way that it's being viewed or misunderstood. And we're going to bring it up to light so that your awareness expands around the topic and that you can see the full truth of it, right? Because anything that you're not seeing in truth, you're probably seeing half of the truth, right? So all it is a matter of expanding the awareness around that topic so that you can see another view of it and now have the biggest picture view, which the gold in that is that it opens up possibilities for you. Your bigger awareness opens up more possibilities for you to utilize that energy in a way that serves you in your highest degree. So, how we get untruths is just by virtue of being alive, really. There are programs running through our societies and cultures that can sometimes limit us. And it's not wrong for us to be limited for the time that we are, but there comes a time when we are ready to expand our awareness on the topic and are mature enough to handle a bigger awareness, right? It's like It's like we have children coming into the world, and we don't bombard our children with the truth of what life is right at first, right? Like, you're not explaining to the toddler that there are things such as serial killers in the world, right? Because that's not appropriate for a toddler to have to live with and process, right? They're not going to be able to put that into context of a larger picture because they don't have a grasp of the larger picture. So because of these kind of things, that we're protecting our children, we're also wanting them to behave certain ways and fit into society and be considered good, and these ways of operating on Earth are passed down through generations, and things get twisted and turned, and so it's just like the game of telephone, where our methods of operating have brought us further and further away from the truth, not because we necessarily wanted to do that, but just by virtue of having information passed along and having its purity put through biases that are then passed along, And it's not wrong, because when we have a family line that is experiencing certain misunderstandings or biases or limitations, they are deeply studying a certain view of an energy, right? They're digging into that view of that energy, and they know it very well, right? But some of these energies that can be dug into very deeply are things like lack, and there's not enough, and violence, and shame, and low self-worth. And so we can see these things passed along in family lines sometimes, but sometimes what we'll see in family lines is, on the surface, everybody seems like they are upstanding, high-functioning, good people, and then they'll have like a black sheep in the family. And that black sheep seems to be the one that's more troubled, right? And that's because what's been happening, right, is through that family line passing along their ways. It's like it's a pimple that's come to a head. Like the black sheep is, I shouldn't use this analogy, but the black sheep is where it's going to release. The black sheep is kind of making a point of, hey, this way we've been doing it is far removed from purity and truth. And here's an example. We're all kind of pinning it on this person. But the black sheep can serve as, or the scapegoat of the family, or the designated patient of the family can serve as the placeholder for what the family line is unconscious to as being troublesome. Because the coping mechanisms of human beings vary, but there's a few basic ones that are like our go-tos. And one of them is denial, suppression, repression, and projection. So in a family line where you do see a black sheep, really what tends to happen is the other family members are denying that they have the issue, and they are projecting it onto the black sheep. It's like, oh, that person has the issue. I see the issue. It's right there. They're different than the rest of us, They can't conform. They can't fit in. They're not doing it right. But the thing is, the black sheep is always going to be revealing what is in the energy of the family line. And if the other family members are projecting it onto that black sheep, it means they're projecting it from within themselves. The only reason they can see it in that black sheep is because it is in themselves. It's just that they haven't been willing to see it within themselves. And what that means is we would call it, it's in their shadow. So that's just one example of how we can see things that go below our level of awareness and that we tend to see outside of ourselves if we're not willing to see it within ourselves. And how it's happened that we've just kind of been removed from what is truth. And this is just through being downloaded with or witnessing or coming up with coping mechanisms to deal with what was difficult, overwhelming, or misunderstood in our family, in our upbringing, in our experience of Earth as a young child and on. So things that we are unprepared to process or that are deemed something that we don't process by the family, those are going to be put down into our subconscious. And that's what we call our shadow, because we're not looking at it anymore. It's obscured into the dark, meaning we look over here at what we deem is appropriate. And we can tend to suppress and deny as a way of coping with things that we don't find acceptable. Now, some of those things that we may suppress and deny in ourselves are skill sets, because if we are in a family line where, if found to have a natural talent and skill set that shines brightly in comparison to other family members who may be coping in ways that are dysfunctional and who cope in such a way as to tear you down so that you don't shine brighter than them, because their ego is coping by telling themselves that they are the best, or they are the right one, or they are more worthy than you, then some of what gets pushed to the shadow in some of these more dysfunctional families is actually their skill set and their ability to shine, their competence even. So when we look into the shadow, it's not just the darker, less acceptable things that we find. Sometimes we find skills and assets that will serve us very well. And, excuse me, generally it serves us to become more aware of what's in the shadow. And when I call it alchemy, all I'm doing is saying, like, we are looking at that dense stuff, like even if it's something that is a skill set that's suppressed into your shadow, the reason why I'm still going to just label it as dense stuff, it's because, like, it was a dense way of coping with that, right? It's being pushed down. It's not being recognized. So, but it's kind of like we're going to rip up the carpets and let the things come to light. Because even if it was the darkest thing, right? Even if it was something like, dare I say, like child molestation in the home, and that was like pushed under the carpets, putting light on that, bringing that into the light, allows any person that has dealt with that to escape from what was deemed unacceptable into a place of wholeness and healing. Because just when someone is abused in such a way, it does not make them unworthy. It does not lower their value in any way. But because of the way it's treated as something that is shameworthy, it may burden them in that way until it is brought to the light, until it is met with compassion. So even bringing up the darkest stuff can actually turn it to gold, right? Because maybe that person becomes aware of their own strengths and resilience and value, and then starts leading a group where they counsel and hold space for other victims. And it actually turns into a great asset, where it eventually, just like ends that whole shadow happening on Earth, right? Because every action is going to make a ripple into the energetics of society. Like we act like doing our part isn't enough because the problem is so big. But that's not true, because doing our part is all we can do. We don't have control over other people. We do have control over ourselves. We do have the ability to what's called doing the work on ourselves. And though it will serve humanity in that way, it is also like not the reason we're doing it. We're doing it to become the best version of ourselves, so that we are, when we are in society and being an example for our children, and being a friend or a wife or an employee, we are doing it in such a way that we feel happy, that we are comfortable, that we are not operating in such a way where we're feeling shame about parts of ourselves that we need to hide, or that we need to put on a mask in order to interact with certain people, or deny certain parts of ourselves so that we can be more acceptable to ourselves and others. So when I talk about it in terms of that, now we're getting into the skill that's going to be required in some cases, which is bravery. So when we get to things like that, we'll address that. We will address blocks to bravery and things like that. My aim here is to take us through this process of just kind of uncovering and getting us free of the things that are burdening, and breaking free the things that are hidden, that are assets to us. They're hidden in our own psyche. And really paving the way for us each to be comfortable in our own uniqueness. We're not copies and cookie cutter versions of each other. We do have a lot of the same energies that we each deal with, but we each have our own unique perspective, and we each have our own unique energy signature that we come in to experience those energies with. So there's no two people on Earth that are exactly the same. None. So it's kind of silly to think that we would all need to fit into a certain box that's expected of us. It's enslaving, it's limiting, and it's misery causing eventually, you know? And if you have beliefs that oppose that, like I could hear someone saying like, well, I feel more comfortable when I fit in. It's like, yeah, I understand that. I get that, right? It's been unsafe for the people who didn't fit in sometimes, right? We've seen them get murdered. We've seen them get ridiculed. We've seen them get excluded. So I get why it's more comfortable to fit in. And that's where bravery comes in, right? Essentially what we're doing is like we're freeing ourselves. So we know from history there have been times where people maybe longed to be free but didn't feel safe enough to free themselves. This is human nature. This is a normal way to feel, so it's understandable. And it doesn't mean that you can't look at this process and follow along and try it, but it also means that you don't have to. If this isn't the right thing for you, if you're not prepared to take the steps for yourself, then just know that this is a tool that you may come to further down the road, and that will be here. This is a timeless process, so whenever you decide to come to it is the time, right? Like, for instance, I can think of, personally, I've been on a journey of finding a way for my body to release all the weight that I've gained. And I actually know what I need to do now because I've been using an app to track my calorie intake, my hydration, my activity levels, and I found that just like I thought, I'm not overeating. I'm usually eating far less calories than the plan would suggest that I would need to lose weight. And I'm still like within 10 pounds, I've lost and gained the same 10 pounds 3 times within a month. You know, my total weight loss from the app's record is 16 pounds, but then, you know, then like the next day it could go down to like 10 pounds and, you know, cause I could gain that 6 pounds like in one day. And so I know that there's a lot of like fluid retention, right? So by tracking my whole kind of situation, I've seen that like if I'm not as active, that tends to be a time that my body wants to hold on to things. Also, depending on what I'm eating, what time I'm eating, I'm doing a lot of fasting. But it doesn't matter, even if I fast for 22 hours a day and just eat one meal, my body still holds on. It doesn't cause weight loss for me to even do that several days in a row. So in finding that out about my body, you know, I've realized like, okay, it's something else going on here, right? And I came across this person on Instagram called the Workout Witch. The Workout Witch? Yeah. And she sells a course which is designed for releasing trauma from the body. It's somatic exercise. So it's kind of putting pressure on points in the body that will cause the body to release, to like tremor and release the trauma that it's holding. And I think it's become very obvious to me that my body is holding trauma. That's why it's not releasing. It's not about calorie intake and exertion for me at this point. I've proven that by using the app and tracking everything very well and seeing what's been happening. So I have this tab open on my phone. I know I'm going to buy the course. But I've just been waiting because like I went through a time where I was down with an illness. I came down with something. And I had to like go through that. And I was like, well, you know, I don't need to buy this course because I know I'm not going to be doing it right this moment while I'm, you know, not able to do anything except cough a lot. And so I've just had that tab open and I know that there'll be a time in the future here when I'm ready to take that on. And it's like a 30-day course and you actually own it for life. So I could have brought it early, but I'm thinking like, why put it on my credit card and pay the interest until I actually need it, right? So I will purchase that course. So I'm just like using that as an example to say like, if you know that this is something you want to try and you need to like kind of get yourself ready for it, like that makes sense to me. Do it that way if that's what works for you. But the whole purpose of me doing this is because thinking about doing it and doing it are two different things. And in my readings, about 3 years ago, I did do some walking us through the healing process. And then I kind of like drifted off from those type readings. And so more recently over the years, I've been just doing like regular old readings where I will reference how to do the alchemy. I'll say the steps. I'll be like, do this, this, and this. And what I've come to is like this realization of like, well, I am an alchemist. I can alchemize these energies. When I do those steps, I've gotten so good at it and I've done it so many times that it's like that. I can alchemize an energy very quickly. And I think, well, if other people aren't utilizing this that way, it's not working that way for them, why? What is that, right? And so I thought, well, maybe they need a little bit more hand-holding. Maybe it would help them if I did the alchemy with them. So that's what these alchemy readings are, is me walking us through the steps and actually doing the steps with you. So it won't just be you holding space for yourself. I will be also holding space for you to do the alchemy. I will be using my energy manipulation tactics to assist in the process. And that's a skill I have. So I thought, why not use it for this? And the fact that we're doing readings and we're doing like general readings means that we can do many people at once, right? Many people can tap into that an energy signature where there's a common misconception or like a common collective of people who are overwhelmed by that topic, where it's stuck in them as karma. Some of these karmas don't originate from this lifetime, right? But that's okay. We don't have to necessarily focus on it from another lifetime. We'll have an access point in this life. But I'm just kind of offering that as an explanation on why that would even be something you had to deal with, right? It's like, well, it's something that you wanted to kind of untangle, that you needed to kind of get closure on in this lifetime. So you kind of I lost my word. You kind of like recreated, that's the word, the scenario that would allow you to alleviate that karma, transmute it, alchemize it, see it for what it is, right? So another way that this is going to be a useful process, and maybe I'll share a little bit about how I came to this in explaining it from this angle, is like if you find yourself like with habits and coping mechanisms that you know aren't serving you. Like a good example, which isn't from my life, would be like you want to quit smoking cigarettes, but you haven't been able to yet. In my life, it was things like I want to stop crumbling under pressure. I want to stop having rage triggers. I want to feel safe in my life. I want to feel loved. I want to feel, understood. Things like that. Like, these were the things that were kind of repeating in my psyche that I was having trouble with, right? Because I grew up in a lot of trauma. So I had a lot of things like kind of like taking precedence over just living an everyday life. Like, as far as like fitting into society and doing what everyone else, what was expected of me, I wasn't able to, because my psyche was all clogged up with the coping mechanisms of trying to live with unprocessed trauma. So in my case, it was like a matter of like, okay, I know I've got to deal with this stuff. So what am I going to do to deal with it? That's why I decided that alchemy was for me. Someone who has a habit that they're trying to change, like quitting smoking, and they're not able to, this is where alchemy comes in handy. Because now you're going to look into the psyche and kind of trace back to the root cause of why that's even something that you want to do. And what purpose is it serving? And where is the hidden benefit? And what would you lose out if you stopped doing it? And, we're going to explore all these type things so that you'll be able to release habits, limitations, just things that you know aren't serving you anymore. And in the process, you may just, as a byproduct, uncover things about yourself that you didn't know. You'll definitely get to know yourself better. There may be times where we actually dig for treasure, meaning dig for some of the skill sets that you might have denied in yourself that you have naturally and inherently. But I'm going to let this be intuitively guided as well. So I've decided that I think I'm going to number the readings, and sometimes we'll be referencing other readings, because sometimes this can be like a Jenga tower, and I think that will be good. So if like we do a reading, like say we start with reading number 1, and you find that there's a block in you to something we've done. Like that you were following along, but you couldn't quite get to the place that I was suggesting we get to because something got in your way. That's the thing that I want you to either email to me or note in the comments. Noting it in the comments would be ideal, but I know that does take a level of bravery, and not everyone's going to feel safe enough to do that, and that's okay. So it's okay to email me if you need to. I may not respond if I get like overwhelmed with information, but I will take it in. I'll definitely go from there, and then we can address that thing in the next reading. If it happens that there are more people experiencing a certain issue, it'll be nice for me to see what we're running into so that we can target that thing next. Right? So I'm open to suggestions. This is sort of experimental, I guess. I mean, I don't have any doubts about it working. You just have to do it. And that's what I meant when I said, like, thinking about it and doing it are two different things, right? It's good to plan to do things sometimes. Sometimes that's what you need to do, is to acclimate your mind around, wrap around like the fact that you are going to be doing it, or get yourself ready, or get the safe space ready. And other times there's a need to recognize like procrastination tactics and avoidance tactics, and actually to just like go into it and know that you can do it. You will come out the other side. And, the worst thing that's going to happen is that you're going to cry, and that you're going to feel some pain. But like, if you're an adult now, right? And so what you're feeling, just know that you're the parent to it. Like, it's the larger version of you who survived everything you've survived up to this point, who is being with that hurt part of you. So you can hold space for the hurt part of you. It's just pain. It's not going to stay forever. You're just going to be with some pain. Like, that is something you can survive. You know that because as a human coming into adulthood, I know that you've survived pain already. And there may be an underlying pain that's been niggling you for years that will actually be alleviated when you be with it head on with no resistance. When you welcome that pain in and actually no longer suppress, deny it, avoid it, or project it. It's like magic, right? Alchemy is sometimes referred to as magic, because you'll see what happens. And once you see this, once you go through the process a few times and you see the magic in it, I think you'll understand exactly why I wanted to do this and present this, and why I've been so willing to go through this process for myself over the years. And I've been doing shadow work for, I don't know, more than 10 years. And for me, it was because my coping mechanisms kind of like, the majority of them crumbled, and I couldn't hold myself up anymore into my coping mechanisms, because it was just like, I couldn't function. I was uncomfortable in my body to the degree that I couldn't sit still anymore. I had suicidal ideation, meaning I, every day, all day, for a lot of years, thought about dying and to alleviate my discomfort. I felt trapped because I had children already, and my father committed suicide, so I was, in this kind of like grappling with it, I knew that it didn't feel nice when my father did that, and I had this thought about my children and what it would mean for them, and how I couldn't protect them if I wasn't here. And so thank God that I didn't do it, because to me now that's laughable that I would have taken that route, but at the time it was very real. It was very real threat that stayed with me for years of my life. And it's never even, it was actually the first thought that came into my life at any sign of overwhelm back then. And now it never enters. It would never. It would just never happen. Because there's a difference in my psyche and the way I'm operating now. And I'm not operating with all those coping mechanisms. And I have actually freed myself of the burdens of the pains that I was trying to avoid, suppress, deny, and project. Any time that I notice something that needs my attention, I give my attention to it because I have bravery. I have so much experience in doing it that it would be illogical for me to not just keep being the one who shows up for myself when I need it. Because it's like, it's easy. It's easy now. It's very easy. And that's because I've done it for so long. That's because I've proven to myself that I do love myself, that I can show up for myself. And that's not where I started. And I want to be clear on that, right? So if you're coming into this and you're not in that place and you don't have clarity and you feel really confused and you feel really overwhelmed and you just know you're miserable, it's okay to feel those ways, and we will work with that too, you know? You just gotta take one step at a time. Just the step in front of you. Just the step in front of you. Okay? With that said, I'm going to end this one, and I'm going to do a separate recording for the first reading. So, we'll see you there.